Hello. I made something. So yes, it's been a minute and I did actually make something. For those of you who have been watching me on the Blue Sky and everything, you will be no doubt aware I have been hard at work for the past 2 months or something since Daggerheart came out on a campaign frame involving this little spot right here. Let's just bring it up on the big screen so you can all see it. Yes, this is the island of Tai-Cani. This is one of the earliest parts of the like the wider Vorsal setting that I made years and years and years ago, but I never really did anything with it. It was just a couple of paragraphs, a couple of concepts, and didn't really do much there. Instead, for a bunch of years I was more focused on the more traditional fantasy Game of Thronesy type stuff, whereas this is a lot more I would say blood and sand kind of storyline. This is a very early draft of the cover that I'm working on. You can see it's actually painted. These aren't Photoshop filters or Clip Studio Paint filters. Lord knows nobody uses Photoshop anymore. Ooh. And you can probably tell that these were actually inspired and based on the first draft of like Hero Forge minis. I'll actually... Where is the page? Here we go. So this is what, you know, this was the actual reference that I was working with. As soon as I've got everything blocked in, that, however, that's when the detailing is going to be done, the refining and the changing of things. But yes, this is the Dunes of Tai-Cani. As you can see right here, again, everything is work in progress. You know, logos are work in progress, covers are work in progress. But yeah, a Daggerheart campaign frame. Yes, this is my very first release for Daggerheart, and here it is. Yeah. I was able to put all this together using the glory that is Homebrewery, and two lovely people. I forget their name at the moment. I really should have brought it up, but if you double check on the Daggerheart subreddit and everything, and various other, you know, homebrew communities for Daggerheart, you will absolutely find the template that they made. This is absolutely not the finished thing, and you can sort of see, I wonder if it shows up on the preview, but yeah, I currently am at 37 pages. A lot of the campaign frames in the core book are 3 or 4 pages long. What the fuck happened? That's what happened. I got a little excited. I got a little overexcited with some of the ideas, because the original idea I had 2 months ago was I was going to release a bunch of campaign frames. I have a list of basically over 8, but I basically refined it to 8 of the more interesting ideas. And I was like, okay, well, you know, like maybe 1 or 2 a month, I'm going to release like a specific campaign frame that is a small slice of my homebrew setting. And each one of them is going to have a different vibe, it's going to be a different story and everything. And the one I opened up with was Dunes of Tai-Cani, because, as I said, it's a location that has always been something I really wanted to get out there. I really wanted to share that story and everything, and like the location, the setting. However, the thing is, so I would say this, the basic layout that I have so far for this, and you can see it's just taking a moment to render everything because I have 3 monitors, and this is a tiny ass laptop. This is not a high powered device. This is a pretty, you know, simple laptop there. But the first couple of pages, as well as like the 1-page vibe check, the pitch that shows you everything about the tone, what the overall vibe of the game is going to be, what the touchstones are, etc. I then have a brief word from the author, which I can't scroll up any further because I can't move my overlay without causing some issues, so I'm not going to bother, but whoops. But I basically go into detail about what this particular version is, because I'm kind of in two different directions at the moment. I really want this to be a thing that people are excited about. I want this to be a thing that people, are willing to, buy, and I want this to be something that is going to really excite people and is going to be really useful for their games and for them to build upon and, make their own campaigns and everything. And to that end, I've really tried to go above and beyond and go into detail in regards to like setting up a bunch of factions, a sandbox environment. So this isn't just a campaign frame. This really is a whole sandbox setting with a bunch of pieces that you can play around with, different antagonistic factions that don't like each other or do like each other, various events that have been going around. There is a major threat. There is a major background concern, which is of course included in the very opening pitch. Travel an ancient land blasted by both time and arcane fire to defend against the rebirth of a primordial dragon. That is basically the end boss right there in the opening, and I have some brief snippets of some of the work in progress art of various elements that are going to be of importance. But I wanted something that had enough depth to it that you can go in a completely different direction. While I do have a campaign frame, a campaign idea, I wanted the reader, who would be a GM, to be able to just take the parts that they don't need out and tell their own story in this setting. So very briefly, we have like a loose overview about the major stuff that's going on, local history that your characters, the players, would know. So again, the opening few pages, they're basically for your players. A list of like what communities are available, and this does include the Void playtest stuff, because the creators of Daggerheart have been, throwing so much new stuff out really quickly. And I wanted to try and at least speak to that, especially something like, say, the Warborn or the Freeborn. They actually fit really well in this setting, since there was a major war 5 years previously that a lot of people are still kind of recovering from. And again, like for the ancestries, for the most part, I want to say I touch on every single core ancestry. I didn't really touch on the Void playtest ancestries. The main reason being that what I have listed here, I would say I've organized the ancestries in terms of how prevalent they are going to be in this setting. So the Drakona, elves, goblins, ribbets, and so on, they're going to be more like the more important integral focus of the setting. Others further down the list, like say, your traditional fantasy races, dwarves, humans, and the Infernus, which is basically the Daggerheart version of a tiefling, they're not really as important. They can in theory be played, but it's not their setting, it's not really their story. This is definitely more of a focus on the Drakona more than anything else. This is because the story that we're telling is, for the setting at least, this is the seat of their birth. This is their origin story in essence, and so they have a very rich and fairly prevalent culture in this location. So it makes sense for them to be like the focus rather than humans. Humans barely exist here. The only other thing I would say is I flat out removed clanks. Clanks are the automata, the robots, the mechanical characters. They exist in the wider setting. It's just, as I say here, Clacks are sadly not playable in this campaign frame, even though they do exist in the wider setting of the Vorsal. They are a highly rare artificial construct, and are mainly found in the Dwarven Forgelands, or at least beneath it, in the southeastern region of the Crux. These are all completely different continents, you know, like literally the polar opposite end of the planet. While it is possible for one to have travelled the tens of thousands of miles needed to get here, encourage your players to pick an option that can be more closely tied into the story you are telling, and to save their kick-ass clank build for a later game. So, I would say that's pretty much the only hard line where I'm like, they don't fit. They just don't work here. But anyway, and as we get further into it, there's a brief thing about like the classes that are available, and I explain how magic is treated in this setting as compared to, say, others. I mean, it's not so much like, say, Age of Umbra, where any sort of like divine spellcasting is considered heretic, or, you know, like you're a follower of like the false gods or something like that. It's more a case of magic in my setting is very controlled and regulated, like any kind of like arcane spellcrafting. It's basically considered plutonium. It's like nuclear fission. You have to have a license, or I mean probably more akin to, you know, firearms. You are not going to wander around casting spells without a license. And I go through the various types of arc magic that you have. So like, say for example, like how druids are treated, how like bards are treated as spellcasters, and, you know, stuff like that. So all the nuance for the characters and everything is kind of in that section. After that, and a few, of course, session 0 questions that are kind of particular to the setting and what's going on here, we then go into the GM only thing. And I'm going to skip through a few things, but it's more like the real history about what's going on. The time frame for my setting is how do I put this? Elden Ring was a big inspiration, even though I've been working on this setting for way before Elden Ring was a thing. But one of the things I like about Elden Ring that kind of fits with my setting is concepts of deep time. You can say something like, oh, thousands of years ago this happened, but how does that actually work in a real setting? What else happened thousands of years ago? And so the time frame for this campaign frame, the inciting incident was, I want to say, 14,000 years ago. I think it's 14,000, yeah. So because we're dealing with the origin of a species, you know, that's how far back the timeline is going in this instance. Believe it or not, the wider timeline for my setting, we're going back way, way further. Not only do I have a whole planet figured out, I have how the planet began, what it was like originally, like dawn of time shit, and some of the major beats and some like the ancient forgotten races, what those actually are, what scars they have left on this planet, and what remains of them to this day that people just walk right by and just consider to be normal parts of the setting, because for them it is normal. It's always been there. So, you know, that's just kind of like a little bit of the flavor there. But yeah, as we go through here, a bit of a stock photography there, all that's going to be taken out of the final version. We start getting into the land of Tai-Cani itself, and I'm going to try and avoid spoilers as best I can, you know. Don't look too closely at the details, but each one of these is going to be a different province. Let me show you the this more zoomed in version here. Each one of these named areas here is actually its own specific area, its own zone, if you will, with its own little areas of interest. There's different things going on, and little story seeds for your players to interact with, and for you as the GM to mess around with. But But yeah. And as you can see here, there's like, again, there's formatting stuff that we're still trying to work on. This is just like a rough draft. But one of the things I did want to point out is certain areas, they have, as well as the majority population, who the factions are, they have environments and a major settlement. Not all of them have the major settlement, but the environments are specific stat blocks that I have made for this setting. So the major settlement for this area, Cholai, is called Joka. And this is the stat block for Joka. It explains in a nutshell, it's the holy city that stood for thousands of years as the beacon of Drakona culture. It gives you an impulse. Now in Daggerheart, the environments are basically a antagonist or an ally, depending on how you look at it, and they have their own stat blocks that go into things. So while it is a location, there is still an intent to the location, and it has like impulses. So these are basically sort of like the things you as a GM should be focused on when you're running this particular location. So the impulses for here would be inspire awe, reverence, and piety in the Tarragon faith. So the Tarragon faith is something that we get into a little bit in other sections, but it is, you know, the general religion that is currently the dominant one for the Drakona in this area. So, and then you have very specific features for it. Keep the outsiders out. Have you heard the good news? Suffer not the heathen, and the rebels must croak. That's in reference to what we call the Ribbet Rebellion. That was another major event that happened in recent time where a ton of Ribbet, those are the frog characters, have basically, they were slaves here and they have completely revolted, and they have leapt north out of the district of Cholai. And so there's a whole thing going on there. There's, you know, slight rebellions. There's a very the general vibe of this location is very overtly holy city. Lots of Drakona paladins, making sure that nobody is disrespecting the faith, and so on and so forth. And now that's just one of the general vibes there. But as we run further down here, you can see some of these sections. There's a lot of writing, some of them a little bit more than others. So trying to do an even spread has been a little bit difficult. And then of course you have Nepe. Nepe is, I'll be honest, at this point I am genuinely considering not having it be a province of itself and just having it be part of this other section called Mamaria. But yeah, it's where the kobolds live. I knew I wanted kobolds in the setting. I didn't really, because the Ribbets became such an important thing. They are the small oppressed little guys, so it made sense for them to be the focus rather than the kobolds, because that's usually what role kobolds have. But I need kobolds in the setting, even though they don't exist in base Daggerheart. So you see, because originally this was, the wider world was built for D&D and other tabletop games, and I'm now branching it out into different systems. So I have, as you've seen in other videos, I'm working on a Shadow Dark specific region, which is a totally different continent. I'm also working on, of course, like 5th edition D&D homebrew, which is the more Game of Thronesy type stuff. So for overlap and everything, and just, because everyone loves them, that's why, I included the kobolds, even though I have not yet got around to stat blocks, adversaries, the specifics. But yeah, that's one of the things that I'm currently, dealing with. And then after we have the general primer on what the setting is, I also have some extra things on campaign mechanics. So specifically, the only thing I really have, aside from like the Zeppelin travel, I would say would be the red sands themselves. And you see them as... Oh, this is actually a really old version of the map. I just realized, because all of this is actually part of the Red Sands too. But yeah, so in essence, the Red Sands are very iron rich because, like in regular deserts on Earth, we have that very strong, iron content that oxidizes. That's what makes a lot of really strong, vibrant orange red sands out there. So because we're dealing with a fantasy setting that involves elves and everything, I decided that the red sands would be toxic to those of a fey persuasion, especially pure-blooded elves. They just can't handle it. And so there's various mechanics and stuff in regards to that. However, as I showed really briefly, we have a subculture of elves. They're referred to as the Dungane or Dune Elves. They are a fairly important part of the setting. They are elves that have subsisted there ever since the Drakona were born. And they have just not only adapted, they thrive with the iron-rich environment. So basically, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name. The Fremen. That was sort of like the cultural touchstone I was looking at there. So basically, they're my version of the Fremen from Dune. So like red eyes instead of blue. A little more feral, a little more, they're not very, sort of traditional fey. They are a more primal kind of culture in this regard. But again, I just wanted to be very clear. I did want to be careful about any like really strong overt references to real world cultures or anything like that. Yes, it's 2025. I'm very aware of trying to have the flavor of something without turning it into a parody or trying to copy paste somebody else's culture and turn it into a fantasy trope, because we're better than that. But these were some of the influences that went into it. There's a bunch of different moving parts there, which I am in the process of refining. So, and we're going to get to that actually, because one of the reasons why I have what I have right now is I'm in the process of sending this out to a couple of beta readers. It is not finished yet, not by any stretch. I'm currently on almost 40 pages of text. As you can see here, it's a fairly weighty chunk of writing. But what I really want is I want to make sure that not only does I want it to make sense, because a lot of this stuff has been things that have been in my head for almost 10 years. And I'm just like, the past 2 months, I've just been living rat-like in over my keyboard, trying to type everything out. And I'm a little bit too close to things. I want to make sure that this actually is usable, that it makes sense. And again, part of that process is going to be, sensitivity, consultation, making sure that, that this isn't just another copy and paste of some foreign culture as a fantasy race or something, because as I say, I like to think we're better than that these days. Another thing is also like the mechanics, like as we get into things here, like the actual adventure that I have. And again, be careful for spoilers if you're reading too close, but I want to basically list off a couple of different frames, different particular scenes. And again, like the whole adventure I have is 1, 2, 3, 4, basically 5 pages in total. 5 pages of just particular little chunks of scenes, of moments that you as the GM, the keeper, are going to be able to spread throughout the other stuff that's going on in your campaign. But you don't need any of that. I want, with everything else that's come before this, I want, as I said previously, I want there to be enough structure and enough of interest where you can run without that. Now, everything I've shown you so far, aside from the city stat block for Joker, it's been mainly just vibes. It's been flavor. It's been you know, lore and backstory, and you can use this pretty much with any kind of system. But how do we make this into Daggerheart? How is this a Daggerheart campaign frame? So a lot of the things that I go into more detail with in like the adventure section is like some of the key antagonists. I don't have the name of a major villain other than the final threat. You know, the primordial dragon that I mentioned. There is a cult that are working on releasing this entity. Now, the members of that cult, the specifics that you're going to be dealing with, are going to be up to you and your players, because the character backstory that your character is going to have, where they are interacting, you know, where they're doing their character creation and they're doing all their different, you know, questions as to how everybody knows each other. One of the most important things I'm trying to flesh out and I'm trying to add to this is making villains from their backstory be the ones connected to this, you know? I want to really embrace the part that even though I have had this world in my head for 15 plus years at this point, and even though like when I've made D&D content in the past, it's been very, okay, this is the list of everything that has happened. These are the specific enemies. These are their specific stat blocks. But you know, it's all very fleshed out and focused and refined. And it doesn't give much room for you, the GM, or the players themselves to affect much, really. With Daggerheart, what I really like and what I'm trying to embrace with this particular release is that it's a lot more open-ended, that they are as equal a part of the world building as I, the person who created the campaign frame, without making something that is just like, just do whatever you want. You know, I want there to be that balance. I want there to be something that's specific enough and interesting enough and has enough of a structure that you and they can all work together to make something that's theirs and yours, as well as fits with the vibe that I'm trying to get off. You know what I'm saying? And it's a balancing act, especially since the moment Daggerheart released, I started on this, you know, and I've not stopped since it came out. So I'm currently at this point in time with this video, I am taking a break. I'm taking a short break. And I'm sharing the PDF with a couple of select people. First of all, to try and figure out, as I mentioned, if any of this makes sense, or if it's just absolute inane, mad, rambling scrawl. Okay? And if it does make sense, and if anything, you know, needs refining to refine it, then I'm going to be sharing it with a wider general Daggerheart community to figure out, how does this play? Is there anything you would want to change? Is there anything you would want added? Is there anything you want removed? You know? And from that point, we'll hopefully have a release by the end of the year. I was being very optimistic about maybe an October release. I'm currently recording this towards the end of August, but let's be honest. I would rather not rush something out. Even though the original idea was to create something nice and simple that I could get out on a fairly timely turnover, that's not what this became. This became something a lot more detailed and specific. So that is, so I'm just rolling with it, and I am basically going to try and do the best I can to make this the best it can be. So final thing, and this is something I will be sharing with, I really need to stop hitting the microphone like that, like it's a red-headed stepchild. The final thing I'm just going to show off real quick are the environmental stat blocks. Now this is something I'm really focused on, you know, trying to make these as modular as they can be. So remember when I said each province uses specific stat blocks and everything? Well, these are those stat blocks. So like savanna, temperate forest, tropical rainforest, wetlands, hot desert, grassland, mountains, Great Lakes, Grand Rivers, and some more specific ones such as the Sylvan Ruins and the Dragon Tombs. And of course, like a wildfire event. That one is more of its own separate thing that can be pretty much, you know, anywhere for the most part. The idea is that when you, as the GM, are doing overland travel through a province, if I go back to the larger map real quick, you can see, I mean, you're not restricted to, you know, using a hex grid, you know, like 10 miles a hex, that kind of thing. It's more a case of having a rough idea about, okay, so this sort of area here would be sort of like a temperate forest. This would be a savanna. This would be sort of like a hot desert. And then, of course, when you're in the red dunes, that's when the iron-rich, toxic to fey rules would come into play as well. You know? But some of the things that I'm really proud of specifically would be like, say, like, that's unique to the setting would be the Great Rivers. And all of this came about, side note, because of a slight oversight. I'm actually going to, this wasn't planned, but let me just very briefly open up a much wider world view. And I've done this before, but let me just pop this guy open real quick. This is actually, you know, the entire world, as I mentioned. And this little bit here, this is Tai-Cani, what we're doing right now. But let me see if this will actually show what I'm talking about. It does not, damn it. But so in essence, when I had the very first version of this setting, I had some rivers that I pre-drew in before I really had a concept of what the scale would be. And I realized that, oh, when you actually zoom in, these rivers are like 2 to 3 miles wide. That's insane. And so I actually turned that into a thing with the setting itself, that there is now a reason there are these 3 mile wide gashes in the skin of these areas that basically cut through the entirety of the landscape. There is lore behind them that is there to be uncovered, and some of it is hidden within their unique stat blocks, such as the Grand Rivers and the Great Lakes. One of the things I like about the Great Lake is, I would say this. Let me just do. So we have a couple of really big areas over here. So you're talking like almost 30 miles wide at one point on that map there. That's pretty great. You know, same with over here. So I was trying to figure out, okay, what is down there, and what can I how can I entice people to go down there? So I decided, bring up the thing. So I decided the Great Lakes would have a feature called Pressure Pushing Down on Me. Yeah, so there's a lot of like jokey sort of dialogue here. But basically, any character, like an aquatic PC, because I do know we have certain, like the Ribbets, the Galapa, but we also have some on the Void, where they're basically Tritons, or they're the water Genasi, but for Daggerheart, not D&D. Regardless of what it is, if you have a character that can go underwater in this desert landscape, this desert setting, there's a lot down there. So I basically have a D4 countdown. They roll the D4. The countdown is how many actions they need to complete before they pass what is called a depth threshold and they find something of value. So say you roll a D4, you get a 1. Well, you only need to do 1 skill check. You explain what it is you're doing before you find something, and you go to depth threshold 2, depth threshold 3, and 4, and 5. With this particular stat block, there are 8 depth thresholds. The thing is, at the end of every single depth threshold, you automatically take 1 stress. So you see, if you know anything about Daggerheart, the deeper you go, the more your stress is slowly building. But as you see on this little loot table, which is based on, at the moment, the Daggerheart core rulebook, page 129, for those curious. For depth threshold 1, roll 3d12 once, and whatever number you get, that's the item you discover. Depth threshold 2, 4d12. Depth threshold 3, 3d12 twice. So that's 2 items, and so on. And so on. And as they get deeper and deeper down, there's more interesting creatures until eventually they have maybe an encounter with something that lives deep in the depths. I'd basically try to get a little bit of Subnautica in there as well as Dune. And of course, the risk reward is the deeper down you go, the more stress you're getting, the more chances there are of, you know, hostile things happening, the more chances you have of rolling with fear. Because remember, each one of these depth thresholds is a D4 countdown. And at the end of every countdown, you're marking the stress, but you're also making up to 4 rolls to get down there every time. And you do need to eventually break the surface. You eventually need to get back up. So let's see, how do we get back up? When they decide enough is enough to try and move back up, they need to make an agility or finesse roll for every single depth threshold countdown they have completed. So you're at if you're at depth threshold 4, you need to make 4 agility rolls to get up there. For every failure, you take an extra stress and an extra hit point because you're basically going up. You're depressurizing at speed. You see? So yeah, you can go down as deep as you want, and you're going to find some amazing things. But will you be able to get back out in time? That's the question. So, you know, risk reward, and also a little bit of lore there too, and that's kind of one of the things that I'm fairly proud of. But yeah, once I have some feedback from, you know, the basic legibility of all of this, you know, that's when I'm going to be putting the PDF out in the wider Daggerheart community, just asking specific people if, you know, this functions. Again, like, I'm probably just going to take bits and pieces, like the stat blocks. I definitely, regardless of this being a paid product, I am actually going to have all the stat blocks. They are going to be shared on the Daggerheart subreddit, because I want them to be used, and also I want to make sure that they're the best they possibly can be. You know, because again, it's a new game. I've actually not been able to actually play it as much as I'd like to. So just because something looks good in a stat block doesn't mean it actually plays well. And now that we've had a lot of people have been able to spend a little more time playing the game, I want to hear their views. And, you know, again, I want this to be the best it possibly can be. That's why I don't want to rush it. I want to make the best possible product that I can. So yeah, basically that is in essence that. And there is of course going to be a lot more of like the actual Daggerheart SRD. I want to make sure that when this does get published, everything is up to date. And also I'm going to be you know, doing credits for, you know, Home Brewery, the people who actually made this template that I have used. Again, you can find that over on the Daggerheart subreddit. Excellent subreddit, do recommend. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the moment. The last thing I will say is, as you have seen in previous videos, I have made some efforts into making, again, as you see, Joker. The keep the outsiders out, have you heard the good news, blah blah blah. I have the stat blocks as they stand so far, ready to go, along with a bunch of other delightful tools over here in Tabletop Simulator. I am going to be making... I'm going to be running some test games. I believe it's going to be on Wednesdays. At the moment, those are closed because originally I was going to be having a variety of people come in and test out the campaign frame, test out the story, but that actually filled up really quick. I was going to open that up to the wider Daggerheart community, but because there's a couple of Discords that I'm on that I really wanted to open that to, but once we have the really rough early beta players taken care of, I will actually be running this game as a campaign. This is just one thing I'm really proud of and everything. Just having, you know, like NPCs that come and talk to you show up right on the screen like that. Thank you, Hero Forge, by the way, for your amazing character creators. Oh yeah, here we have... couple more shots of the Dune Elves, the Dungain, and of course their rivals, who are the Grendel. I've mentioned them a couple of times there, basically. No. Why did you do that? Why? That is not what I wanted. Okay, so that's a great start. Okay. Okay, there you go. Basically, you know, half trolls. They are a thing in the world. They're a thing in the setting. And so I'm doing the best I can to make sure that, you know, they have their place in, you know, the campaign frame itself. Same with that lizard folk and the tribal halflings and a bunch of other stuff. But anyway, that's all a future thing. Right now, I'm just really excited to, you know, get this campaign frame out of the door. It has been something that I've been really excited about making for this world. This particular setting has been something in my head for a long time now, and I just think it's perfect for Daggerheart because it's not your traditional. It's not what I've been doing, basically. It's a very particular type of fantasy. It's a very particular type of setting. And again, like some of the touchstones, as I mentioned, Dune, Moana, ancient Samoan myth, the World of Warcraft, the Cataclysm and Dragonale expansions, Dark Sun. Those are all pretty big influences on this particular world, or at least this particular part of the world. And I just want to make something that is going to stand out, is going to be memorable, and you know, more importantly, is something that is actually useful to you, the people who are running and playing Daggerheart. So if this is of interest to you, feel free to comment in the you know, the little doobly-doo below, and I will see what I can do about hopefully having the you know, having previews up soon. I do not have any immediate plans to open up the Patreon right now. Again, at the moment, I'm still at the phase where I wanted to make the thing almost finished before I started advertising or looking for, you know, beta readers and everything. I wanted to make it as finished as I could before I had people, you know, give it a look over and everything. So we'll see where things go there. But follow me on the social medias. Absolutely, the Blue Sky is the best place to be up to date with everything that's going on there. And I think that's pretty much it. That's 45 minutes. That's 15 minutes longer than I really should have been talking, but you are appreciated. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your attention. And I really hope you're as excited about this as I am, because I'm freaking stoked. This is going to be just this is the first, as I mentioned, this is the first of many ideas. And I would say Dunes of Tai-Cani might be one of the more tame ideas. Let's put it that way. I've got some weird shit planned. I've got some weird shit planned, and I cannot wait to share it all with you. So be safe, be well, and have yourselves a good day. Bye.